when we get to the end of questions, but just so you are aware, we are recording this. So this is a community notification for a level 3 offender that's moving into our jurisdiction tomorrow. His name is Lumasakilla Patterson. He's 29 years old, and he's going to be residing at a community-based services residence on the Johnson Road in First Assessment of Crow Wing County. We have a couple of speakers today. Mainly, our main speaker is going to be from the Department of Corrections, who has kind of the backstory and information on Mr. Patterson. So when I'm done here giving my open remarks, he will take over and lead into that. When we get to the end of the presentation, there will be a chance for questions and answers. Those who are on the Teams format will have a chance throughout this, if you have a question, to use the chat box feature. You can also, when we get to that point in the presentation, if you have a question or a comment, there's a little hand icon towards the top of your screen. If you click that, that will let us know on this end that there's somebody out there with a question. If you're calling in to listen to this presentation, at the end, what we will do is go by the last 4 digits of the phone numbers that are out there, and that will allow you to unmute your phone at that time and ask the questions of any of us that are presenting this evening. From the Sheriff's Office standpoint, just to give you a quick background on how we handle all of our offenders in the community, we have a pretty robust monitoring program where deputies are specifically assigned to various offenders, and Mr. Patterson is no different to that. And that monitoring system allows for the deputy basically to stop in and check whenever we feel we would need to, but several times throughout the year to check and make sure that they're still residing at the residence where they're supposed to be, that they're not operating any vehicles, basically in full compliance with what the state of Minnesota has requested of them. So that happens throughout the year. The deputies will stop without announcement and just check in on the person. The other thing you will hear tonight is Mr. Patterson is residing at a residence where he will have 2-to-1 supervision, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that is another avenue to make sure that he's in compliance with what he's been asked to do. And then thirdly is he's on the intensive supervision of the Crow Wing County Community Services and the Department of Corrections to also make sure. So somebody like Mr. Patterson, even though we might not be happy that he'd be moving into your community or your neighborhood, he is being monitored. We are very confident on our monitoring program for a public safety standpoint that the risk of somebody like Mr. Patterson or Mr. Patterson himself is very low to the community. So with that, those are my opening comments, and I think I'm going to turn it over to Brad here in just 1 second from the Department of Corrections. Just as a reminder, if you have questions as things are going, feel free to type those into the chat box. When we get to the end, we'll announce that we're at the portion of the presentation where we would ask for any questions, comments, and those on the phone who are calling in to listen, we will call your phone number out by the last 4 digits to give you anonymity. So we don't have your phone number out there for the world, but also give you your opportunity to ask any questions that you would like. So with that, I will turn the presentation over to Brad.
All right. Thank you, Captain. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of your day to sit down and go over this important information. As Captain indicated, my name is Brad Vandervet, and I am with the Minnesota Department of Corrections. I work specifically in the risk assessment and community notification unit within the department. And in that role, one of my tasks is to come out and assist law enforcement in matters such as this, where a community is learning about a leveled individual that's entering their neighborhood. And so with that, the information I'd like to share with you today is really going to come in three distinct parts. And for those of you that are attending through the Teams app, you'll be able to follow along as I go through the PowerPoint. For those that are attending by phone, I'll do my best to reference some of the things and some of the items from my presentation as well for your benefit. So my presentation is really going to come in three distinct parts for this purpose. And so I'm going to begin and really kind of outline that fundamental components of the state's broader risk management system in order to really make sure we're all on the same page and we're all having the same conversation, because a lot of us have knowledge or varying knowledge throughout our own life experiences about this topic. And so I want to make sure we're all kind of operating on that same level. Then I'll transition from that information to the individual you're here to learn about specifically. And you'll use that knowledge and that information as kind of an overlay as you're contemplating how to apply this into your own family safety planning efforts and broader community safety planning efforts. And then I'll round everything out with some resources to assist you as you augment those plans further. So without further ado, where I really like to begin this conversation is really kind of where I think we all have a basic understanding. And that is that those individuals that engage in this type of harm, this kind of sexual harm, they exist. They are not new to communities. So the real question then becomes from attendees at meetings like this is, Brad, well then, okay, what are we doing now as state agencies, county agencies, and local agencies to address those that we've become aware of? And that's what I'll get into more detail on. But as I go forward, there's actually a slide going to be coming up here shortly, and it's going to give you a snapshot that's going to really kind of drive home the point of this funnel analogy that I'd like to put in your mind. And that is, from what we know from all the data and research available, both within the state and beyond into national studies and research, is that of those sex crimes that occur, only a portion go on to get reported to law enforcement. And that funnel already begins to narrow. And of those that do get reported, only a portion of those go on to receive formal charges. And the funnel narrows further onto that next group of charged individuals go on, and only a portion of those receive convictions. And of those convicted, only a portion of that group will go on to receive sentences that require them to go to prison. And that distinction is unique, and you'll see why as we get into this. So again, while we're focusing on one individual tonight, I genuinely want to keep your awareness broad as you are contemplating the totality of all of this information. So one of the first components of that broader state risk management system that was put in place to address this unique group of individuals is the registry. Now, the registry came online in the early 90s and is really born out of the advocacy of the Jacob Wetterling family following Jacob's abduction and on to additional advocacy groups within the state and beyond. And they went around and they really spoke with law enforcement and asked, what more can we do to support you in all of your efforts of policing this population? And law enforcement really replied back across the board and said, what we need is a database that collates all of our information so that it can be accessed in a timely way across agencies. Because prior to the registry, all of this data would be kept and housed within silos, if you will, within each agency's specific record keeping method or model, and would be shared only after the fact should something arise in a neighboring community. And so when you think of things in terms of Heinrich, who abducted Jacob, he was miles and miles from the community where he resided. And so the registry assists law enforcement in this important knowledge sharing ability. So the registry came online in 1991 and is ran by the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the BCA. And the BCA collects and maintains all of the data required to be placed into it by those subject to the registry. That information includes things like their addresses. That includes primary addresses and secondary addresses. Think of places where they may frequent, like say family members' homes, perhaps vacation property, rental property, or significant others' homes, or whatever the case may be. So those would have to be known to law enforcement as secondary addresses. They also must register their place of employment. And if they are operating a motor vehicle for that employer, that information must also be known to law enforcement. Other things the registry collects and maintains are where they go to school, and any vehicles they themselves use, own, operate, or possess. So even the old broken down car in the driveway needs to be known to law enforcement. Some additional components of the registry, those subject to it must also make law enforcement aware of any places they may rent, such as storage units or storage lockers. And they also keep law enforcement apprised of any phone numbers or other contact methods that they may be using. So you can see the robustness of the registry, and this assists law enforcement in rapidly singling out individuals of interest should they get a call from a community member such as yourself, and you're able to give them a vehicle description or a personal description. They can whittle down through the offense demographics of the individual registrant. If they approached a minor child, gender of male, they can single out those individuals uniquely. So it's a very quick way for them to get a very hopefully short list of folks to go meet up with should the need ever arise. Now, because the nature of this data that's collected is determined to be private by law, it can only be used for law enforcement or correctional purposes only. And so this is why the registry is not something that people get to see. Often the Department of Corrections public register and search site, where we post those subject to notification, is confused with the registry, and it is not, as you'll see going forward. So often the next question that comes up when I start to describe the registry is then, Brad, who has to register then on this database? And over the years, it has really kind of grown and changed. It began with only those individuals convicted of or charged with sex crimes, sex offenses. But it changed where the state saw the benefit of the registry and how it was being applied and used by law enforcement and corrections, and included other offenses that are not sex specific, such as kidnapping and false imprisonment. And that's why many of you who've been around may know or remember the name change. It used to be the Sex Offender Registry and is changed now to the Predatory Offender Registry. And so an easy way to keep it straight in your mind as we go forward tonight into this information is this: all sex offenders are predatory offenders, while not all predatory offenders may be sex offenders. So as we go forward, it's just an easy way to kind of keep it straight in your mind. So back to that funnel analogy that I shared with you. Here's some numbers that I was able to pull just today to give you a snapshot of what's going on in and around your own communities. And as I mentioned, not all of those individuals are known to us because only a portion go on to even be reported and then convicted and sentenced. So as of the first of this year, there were approximately 18,727 registered individuals within the state of Minnesota. As of today, and this snapshot is that 30,000 foot flyover view, these numbers are dynamic and they do change frequently, as these individuals do tend to move with a pretty high degree. But as of today, a snapshot, there were 202 registered individuals within Crow Wing County. Now that includes those individuals that have no risk level assigned. It includes levels 1, levels 2, and levels 3. And you'll see the smaller number to the right for those of you that can see my slide. There are 6. Of that 202 registered individuals in Crow Wing County that are registering as of this morning, 6 are subject to broad public notification, this type of meeting. You can look at neighboring communities, and for the benefit of those that are on the phone, I will read these numbers. I apologize to those of you that are able to see the slide, but I want to make sure everybody has this in their mind. So Cass County, there's 133 registered individuals, 6 of whom are subject to that broad public notification. And those are your level 3s or those individuals who were civilly committed for sex offending conduct or behavior. Morrison County, you can see there's 97 registered individuals, 5 of whom are subject to that broad public notification. Now here in Aiken County, if you look, it's one where we have 55 registered individuals residing within the county, none of whom are subject to that broad public notification. So if you have a loved one or family member or perhaps a vacation property yourself in the Aiken County area, know that even though you go to look up Aiken County on the DOC website, and you see that it does not show up, which means there are no level 3s or those subject to broad public notification, it does not mean or imply that there are no registered individuals residing there, because those who are no level assigned level 1 or 2 are not subject to that broad notification. And Mille Lacs County, to round things off, has 105 registered individuals within their community, and again, 0 right now that are of that level that require broad public notification. And so you can recall back to that initial slide I had up where it really says in Minnesota, it is highly unlikely that there is a community anywhere within the state where registered individuals do not reside. Most certainly, there is not a community within the state where a registered individual does not spend their waking hours. As we know, they travel in and out of the communities day in and day out for all manner of purposes and reasons. So the next component of that broader state risk management system that I want to share with and talk to you about tonight is the Community Notification Act. So the Community Notification Act, you'll see, came online in the mid-90s. So 1997 is really predicated out of Megan's Law and is founded on the knowledge and understanding from our robust research and data that a well-informed community is, in fact, a safer community. And we at the Department of Corrections thank our colleagues and partners in the Crow Wing County Sheriff's Office for all of their efforts to ensure that this information gets out to the broadest amount of people possible. And because the Community Notification Act is the reason we're here talking today with you, it's worth going into more detail as to how it works and is applied. Because you see from my earlier slides, it does not apply to everybody. So in order for notification to apply to a registered individual, that person must have crossed the threshold of prison, not just county jail, but prison. That could be a prison anywhere here in the state of Minnesota or any other state in the union to include U.S. territories. It also includes federal prisons and military prisons. And it also includes those individuals, as I mentioned briefly a moment ago, who are civilly committed for sex offending behavior. And this is why I say those subject to broad public notification, because those individuals may not be a risk level 3. They may be a 1 or a 2, but because of their civil commitment status, they're subject to that broad notification, the same as a level 3. So those, or the group then of registrants that notification does not apply, are as follows. Those juvenile offenders, those juvenile registrants are not subject to risk assessment, and so therefore they are not subject to risk level assignment. And also those registered individuals who have received stayed or probationary sentences as a result of their court conviction, they are not assessed. They must, again, cross that threshold of prison. And so when I say those with no risk level assigned, it's that group that I'm referring to. It certainly does not mean or imply that they do not carry themselves risk factors. It just simply means that they are not assessed and assigned unless or until they cross that threshold of prison. So the next question that often comes up when you're thinking about notification then is what roles there are and who does what and how do they all work together. And so you'll see here that the Department of Corrections is tasked with the duty to assess and assign risk levels. And the way that's done is through the End of Confinement Review Committee, or the ECRC. And so the end of confinement review committee, when a registered individual crosses that threshold and enters into prison, begins the process through our office, through the community notification office and risk assessment office, of pulling all the available data. That is all assessments that may have been done, all court reports that may be available, any police index reports, anything that exists, to create the full dossier of what's been going on in this person's life. And then our assessors will go and they will interview the registrant and ultimately take all of this information that they've collected and run it through a risk assessment tool known as the MinSOST, or the Minnesota Sex Offender Screening Tool. Now, the reason I bring up the MinSOST is because it's important as it relates to risk level designations. So the Minnesota Sex Offender Screening Tool is a tool born right here out of our own research and data in the Department of Corrections. We embarked as an agency on a robust study that started back in the early 90s as these laws were coming online, and the initial phase of the study concluded in the early 2000s, over the span of a decade, where the assessors followed over 3,166 known sex offenders into the community at their release and followed them over that period of time. And then a follow-up study was completed following over another 2,000 plus known sex offenders, and that wrapped up in 2012. So we have well over 5,000 sex offenders studied for this risk assessment tool. The assessors and researchers then combined all their findings and conclusions and submitted it for peer review, which is a rigorous scientific process. The tool has met its peer review rigors and is a validated, normed tool. And so the reason I bring that up is this, is so as that risk tool is applied, as these assessors conduct their risk assessment, they will then assign a presumptive risk level through that tool. It will either be a presumptive 1, 2, or 3, and the committee then will review all the details and vote on the risk level. They can depart from a presumptive. And so the assessment or the level will be assigned of 1, 2, or 3. And so when I start using those terms more as we get into this, know that level ones, through that data and research, possess a lower amount of those known predictive risk factors as to their peer group from that study. A level 2 has a moderate amount of those known predictive risk factors, and a level 3 has a higher amount of those known predictive risk factors. The last thing I'll say on risk assessment tools is this, and it's probably one of the more important things to remember, is no risk assessment tool is capable of predicting the future, but they do a lot to assist both law enforcement and corrections agencies in applying resources to best mitigate those identified risk factors, minimize them where they can't be eliminated, and eliminate them where they can be. And that ultimately serves to bring risk down. So once the level is assessed and assigned, the handoff then goes to law enforcement. And law enforcement will provide notification to the community within the scope of the level assigned. So with a level 1 registrant, law enforcement may notify other law enforcement agencies or correctional agencies. They may notify or shall notify victims of or witnesses to the crime if they've requested that level of enhanced notification. And they will also notify other immediate adult household members residing with that individual that's designated a level 1. And that is the scope of a level 1 notification. Now, level 2 notification builds upon those individuals and entities we just discussed with a level 1 and adds, in addition, any other individuals or entities that law enforcement determines to be at specific risk based on that registrant's known pattern of criminal conduct and behavior. And so what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is in an example where law enforcement is made aware of a level 2 entering their community, and they receive that packet, that dossier from the RACN unit, and they determine that this particular individual focuses their offending conduct and behavior on adult females at social gatherings, think places like bars or concert venues. In that scenario, law enforcement may then go out and notify the proprietors of those types of venues within their area, those bar owners or venue owners, so that they can inform and educate their security staff accordingly, and so on. They may not go out and notify the local daycare, because that daycare serves their clients are children from infant to school age. It's often a misperception that level 2 means law enforcement will notify daycare, schools, places where children congregate, and so on. And as you can see from that scenario, it may not always be the case. But now if we flip it the other way, and let's say law enforcement is made aware of a level 2 entering their community, and this individual focuses their conduct and behavior on unaccompanied minors, say teens in transit from school to after school activities or home. And law enforcement is aware of a local teen hotspot or a hangout where teens congregate and socialize in those down times. In this scenario, law enforcement may very well go to the proprietor of that venue, that location, and educate them and inform them. Say, if you see this man around, engaging in conversation with the children, establishing comfort and relationships with them, let us know. We'd like to come out and talk with him and find out more about what he's up to. And so that's the nuance of a level 2 notification. And then on to a level 3 notification, and that is the broad public notification. And that comes in many different shapes and formats. Really, it comes down to how law enforcement communicates best with its community and its citizens. And again, we recognize and thank Crow Wing County Sheriff's Office for all of its hard work to accomplish this effort this evening. So now I want to just touch base on some of the data and research that was conducted to create that risk assessment tool I talked about earlier, because it will be very helpful, I think, as you look to apply this information into your own family and community safety planning efforts. And to kind of kick it off, I think it's to start at that narrowest end of that funnel. Those individuals who have gone through, have been convicted for their crimes, and have entered prison. Year after year, the number of those individuals coming across that threshold does fluctuate and change. But what really does stay static is the breakdowns of risk levels assigned. And you can see from my data here that over 2/3 are those assessed and assigned as levels 1 and 2. 15% on average are assessed and assigned that level 3 designation. So only 15% of those crossing the threshold will go on to be subject to that broad notification component. And so you can see when we get the opportunity to have these notification meetings, just how valuable they really are, as they help us to kind of get our mind around the larger context of what's really going on. So as kind of a final snapshot to just really drive that fact home, as of today, if you were to go on to the Department of Corrections public registrant search site and say, show them all to me, you would see 470 registrants subject to that broad public notification on that site. 470 throughout the state. You could click on them all and look at each and every one of them, or you could find ones that are within your county or counties that you're interested in, or even cities. If you don't find your county or your city, know that there's no one that's subject to that broad public notification within there. But again, don't let that diminish your awareness, because you saw from my earlier slide, it doesn't mean that registered individuals do not reside within that community or at least frequent it. You'll also see from this information here, there are 11 currently whose address is unknown, and they need to be brought back into compliance with the registry. And we actually have quite a high level of compliance with our state's registry, and we thank law enforcement for their diligent efforts in doing that. But if you can ever check those individuals out, you may know more than you think. You may recognize them, and provide that key information to law enforcement so that we can bring these individuals back into compliance. It takes all of us. You yourselves are one significant part of the state's risk management system, as you'll see going forward. Other information that I want to share with you tonight as you're contemplating these safety plans and how to apply what I'm going to talk to you about. I think this is one of those key pieces. The the relationship breakdown between those who engage in this kind of harm and the people they hurt. Now, the data on this slide you'll see isn't actually from our research study. I pulled this from national data out of the U.S. Department of Justice, but it really aligns very much with what our own data and research shows, and I think is good information to have. So what you can see from this is that the majority of those who've engaged in this kind of harm, sexual harm, especially against children and teens, were known or had a relationship to the person they hurt. You can see here from my data, and for the benefit of those on phones, the 59% fall into a acquaintance type relationship, and 34% fall into familial ties, which leaves 7% that fall into a stranger category. And this gives us the most pause, as it should, because we know as we look about and contemplate this information, you say, okay, Brad, yeah, with as far as family members go and as far as people that are acquainted or have acquaintanceships with those I care most for in my life and protect, I have a lot of control as a parent or a trusted adult support person over who those people are and the access that they get to have. But what gives us the pause is that stranger group. This is the group we don't have direct control over. Well, there's a couple things I want you to know about the limitations of this study and studies like it. And that is those who assess these crimes and review them have to create a cutoff point. And that cutoff point for stranger is 24 hours. If the assessor cannot determine that a knowing of the offender and the victim had been established for 24 hours or longer, they would fall into the stranger category. So inevitably, what you would have are scenarios like this, where two teens are at a local house party and the night is going the way it's going and they isolate or separate themselves from the group, and the night takes an awful turn. Now, in this scenario, that would fall into the stranger category. But what we tend to think of more as parents and as supportive community members when we think of stranger encounters is that person that's lurking just outside of our consciousness, just outside of our awareness, who has ill intent. And that category tends to fall in a much smaller range of about 3%. Now, that is cold comfort, I am well aware. But as you're thinking about your own family and even broader community-based resources, please do not pour all of your energy and effort into that 3% group. Make sure you keep your head up and your eyes open for that much more likely incident where somebody has built and abused a relationship of trust. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. Other data and information I want to share with you before we get into the information on this man you're learning about tonight is the age breakdown of those harmed by this kind of conduct. Now, you'll see here from my data that it's broken into thirds, but then pretty quickly, if you're seeing these slides, you're able to determine 2/3 of this group are children. And as you look even more closely, you'll see that that narrowest age range, that 13 to 17 age range, constitutes 33% of those harmed. That's 9% of the population, and that is worth unpacking a little further. Well, what we know as parents and trusted adults is that those children in those early ages, that 0 to 12 age range, are still very much under the direct care of their trusted adult support networks, their parents and their loved ones. And so we and agencies like the Department of Corrections and the Sheriff's Department and even city police departments and so on want to make sure we're giving the best resources available to those adults so that they can vet the people coming into their children's lives and establishing those critical relationships. But what ends up happening when we get into those 13 to 17 age range is the very thing that we work so hard to achieve as a community. And that is a space where our kids can go out and express their autonomy safely. Those teens go out and they are formulating relationships now outside of the watchful gaze of that trusted adult support network. And so we really look at how we are educating our children so that they can be as best informed as possible before they grow into these years, these critical years. The older model used to be the talk, where we would pull our teen aside at that agreed upon age as parents, and we would pull back the veil just enough to show them that the world is not as safe as it had been made to be for them when they were younger. And unfortunately, with that model, what we found was one of two very polar, different or opposite reactions from our teens. Either reaction one, we would get just full on refusal. Dad, you're overreacting. You don't understand. My friends are good people. I make good choices, and so on. Or on the flip side, you'd get a child who was so frightened that they would no longer engage in their beloved activities with their friends within their own communities. And so what we've found over our collaborations and work directly with victim services groups throughout these years is that we want to get away from the talk model. And we want to start having a lot of little talks all the way up and through childhood into those early adult years. Each talk building on the other in an age appropriate way so as not to frighten our children. Because we know that scared kids do not equal safe kids. But we also need our children to understand that nice people do not equal safe people. And so I will be providing you with some additional information again as we get into the resources component of this presentation to assist you as you're thinking about how you want to implement this information and add to or augment those existing safety plans that you already have. But now I'd like to switch gears and get right into the details about the man you're here to learn about today. I want you to use the information I've shared with you this far as kind of an overlay. See where things line up and see where they might diverge with him. This is Mr. Patterson. First, I want to speak to photographs. Photographs are updated on average of annually, or should the subject change their physical appearance in a significant way. So if you were to see Mr. Patterson into the community and notice that he has significantly changed his hairstyle or his facial hair, or I don't know, if he's gotten more tattoos or something along that line, you most certainly can contact law enforcement or corrections and let them know. And they will attain new updated photos if they haven't already been attained, and they will make sure it goes on to the registry, where then I will get them and place them onto the public website so that you always have an accurate photographic depiction of him for as long as he is subject to broad notification. These are Mr. Patterson's vitals. He's currently 29 years of age, and he will be residing in the vicinity or on Johnson Road North in rural Brainerd. Now, I want to speak for a moment to proximal addresses, because often in meetings like this, one of the questions I get is, Brad, can we know where he lives? Won't you tell us where his head hits the pillow at night? It would give us a great deal of comfort knowing that. And you'll recall from my earlier information that the data collected by the registry is private data and is only for law enforcement purposes or correctional purposes. However, we do accomplish a lot with a proximal address. For those that do reside within this community, they will become aware, if they're not already aware, of this individual as he comes and goes during his daily activities. And that information will no doubt be shared in and among that community. And that's just fine. But what we do not want as state agencies and law enforcement agencies is for somebody outside of this community who has no stake in what goes on here, coming in and exacting some revenge scenario that does nothing to mitigate risk and only serves to undermine and erode the very thing you've all worked so hard to build within your own neighborhoods. This is Mr. Patterson's registrable offense history. This is literally taken right from that fact sheet that you've all been provided and is available to you electronically. So I'm going to go right into the details of what happened. In 2011, Mr. Patterson was convicted of a criminal sexual conduct in the first degree out of Hennepin County for a 2008 rape. His offense consisted of him assaulting a 20-year-old female. He was 17 years of age at the time. He was not known to this victim. She'd never met him or seen him prior to this. At 11 p.m. on the night of the offense, he was walking toward her on a sidewalk. As he got next to her, he struck her with his fists and then pulled her while she was stunned into an alley behind a building. He used threats of harm and violence to maintain that control. Once the assault ended, the victim contacted law enforcement and the DNA was collected from the scene. In 2010, Mr. Patterson became known to law enforcement for another crime, not sex related, but that crime required DNA collection. Once that DNA was collected, it was run against the state's database and a match was made. Law enforcement then charged Mr. Patterson, and he was then certified as an adult. Even though he was 17 at the time of the offense, any individual 16 years of age or older can be certified as an adult. This is considered an enhancement to the sentencing guidelines for these very heinous types of crimes. And so he was certified as an adult, and for his crime, he was committed to the Commissioner of Corrections to prison for 120 months with a 10-year conditional release period. Now, I want to take a moment and use this information to explain another question that will often come up in meetings like this. And the question is, Brad, why is it that people who engage in this kind of harm that shocks the conscience, why do they come back out? Why are they allowed to re-enter our society? What's going on here? And part of that answer lies here in determinate sentencing. Prior to that model coming online, we had a more traditional model of parole. And parole was difficult for those individuals like Patterson to achieve. They'd go before a parole board, and the board would often, because of the severity and heinousness of the crime, reject reentry. Now, oftentimes in meetings like this, if I could look out onto your faces, I would see a lot of you saying, you know what, Brad, that's just fine. He can serve his whole time. Thank you very much. But what we found from our data and our research was that this method of locking them away for the full duration of their time, only to release them back into the community at the expiration of their sentence, and 90% or a little better actually of all those incarcerated today will expire from their sentence, was ineffective. Taking them to the gate of the prison and saying, don't come back, did not have the reduction in recidivism that we needed to see as both agencies and communities. So this method was brought online. Now with this method, the law stipulates that 2/3 of that sentence will be served, if it's served, in prison, and 1/3 will be served, must be served, in the community on supervised release. The rationale behind this is that while they're in prison, they are required to go through manners of treatment, counseling, therapy, and other types of programming. And by placing them back into the community under the watchful eyes of trained agents, we were able to ensure that they were applying those skills and tools effectively, so that when that sentence did expire, the individual would have internalized those skills that best mitigated that risk. And in addition to that, so if you split that 120 into 2/3, you slap on another 10 years. So that that's an enhancement as well. It's not all commitments to the prison have that conditional release period. This is an additional piece to ensure that if they serve for a shorter amount of time, say they get the 13 months, they don't just do 2/3 and then have a very brief period in the community. This would extend it for 10 years in the community to be under supervision with a corrections agent to ensure adherence to all those expectations. Those tools were being thoughtfully applied to mitigate that risk. This is Patterson's prison chronology as it sits. In September 2011, he enters prison for that conviction for that criminal sexual conduct first degree. And like I'd mentioned, the end of confinement review committee started to pull all of the information and available data, ran him through that MinSOST assessment tool, and was designated a risk level of 3. He was then released at that 2/3 mark, as the law requires, on August 9th of 2017. And he has been under supervision in communities throughout Minnesota since that date. And he will be moving tomorrow, the 20th, to the rural Brainerd location. So as it sits right now with Mr. Patterson, he will remain under correctional supervision with the Department of Corrections or any county agency, depending on where he would reside potentially, until August 9th of 2027. He will be subject to the registry, however, for life. And so even though he will eventually expire from his correctional duration, his supervision there, he will have to report to law enforcement for life, where he lives, where he works, what he drives, etc. So now I'd like to take the opportunity to ask my colleagues, my colleague with ISR, who's going to be supervising this man in the community, Mr. Eric Welly, to talk to you a little bit more about the ISR program and how it functions. So Eric, if you want to flip on your camera, if you can, I don't know, and turn on your mic, and then just let me know when you're ready for me to advance your slides.
Thanks, Brad. You hear me?
Yep, gotcha.
All right, perfect. So my name's Eric Welly. I am one of the 4 agents that will be supervising Mr. Patterson when he is in our local community. Crow Wing County is one of the 6 counties that my team supervises between the 4 of us. So essentially, I'm just going to be paraphrasing these slides. What the Minnesota State Statute 244.12 to 0.15 states is essentially lays out what ISR is, why it was established. ISR is the most structured form of supervision that the state of Minnesota has, possibly even in the Midwest. Basically, when people come out of the community that are deemed to be appropriate ISR clients, it's basically based off offense, or it used to be. It's more based off of risk nowadays. So we are in charge of making sure they're in compliance with their conditions of release. You know, every offender has different conditions. Also, you know, the giant object of the ISR is public safety and to successfully integrate the offender into the community. You can go to the next slide, Brad. So Mr. Patterson will be meeting with myself, fellow agents, and people with DHS to hopefully collaborate an effort by all of us to hopefully help them successfully reintegrate into the society. Like Brad has already stated, He has been in the community for close to 3.5 years. This isn't day one for him coming out of prison. He's been compliant and out in the community for several years now. And part of release planning purposes, obviously he's not, like I said, coming out of prison, he's coming from the community, is to, help essentially work on those goals that we discussed before: community safety, positive reintegration. And that's something that we have worked on, our team, along with DHS, as far as finding him a appropriate placement. He will be on GPS monitoring. I don't want you guys to focus on that fact, but he will be on GPS monitoring, and we will be monitoring his whereabouts. With that GPS monitoring, he's only allowed inside and outside the home at certain times. With the structure of ISR, he has a very limited window of when he's allowed to job search, grocery shop, so on and so forth. Being on ISR essentially means that you have to earn the free time that you have or get. You don't just automatically get to leave your house whenever you want. You don't get to go fishing with your buddies or out to the movies whenever you please. It's based on your adjustment in the community, how well you're following your conditions of release, so on and so forth. He will be on GPS for a few months, and as long as everything's checking out, he'll probably be taken off the GPS after a few months. You can go next slide, Brad. Like I said before, actually I might not have said this, ISR operates 24/7, 365, meaning there is an agent always working in one of our 6 counties between the 4 of us. I'm one of the agents that's more based in the Crow Wing County area. Hold on one second. I'm based more in the Crow Wing County area, as well as a coworker of mine, Mitchell Swanson, will be the ones that are primarily seeing Mr. Patterson, but I also have 2 other coworkers in other parts of the state between the 6 counties we supervise. Again, like I said, it's very highly structured. When people are first getting out of ISR, we're seeing them 3, 4, 5 times a week. These are all unannounced visits. They're all random. They happen on weekends. They happen at night. They happen on holidays. They happen early in the morning, at your work, at college. Essentially, how the ISR works is you're subject to an unannounced home visit at any time. If some of you are familiar with probation or parole, or maybe even know someone that's on probation or parole, and they might see their PO once a month, maybe once every couple months, that's not how ISR operates. ISR offenders are seeing their agent a minimum of once a week, but most of the time it's more like 3 or 4 times a week. With that, depending on the offender, they're drug tested frequently if they have a history with drugs or alcohol. They're tested for alcohol frequently. Their homes, vehicles, cell phones are all subject to search just to monitor their compliance. How ISR was established in the early 90s was very much so more for accountability. And not that hasn't gone away with ISR. We've essentially trying to help more integrate offenders into the community a lot more than originally. But that still is very much so a large part of ISR is accountability and making sure that offenders are where they say they're going to be, hanging out with who they say they're going to be, at the job they report going to be, so on and so forth. So how ISR looks is Mr. Patterson will have to call out to us every morning and tell us a detailed schedule of where he's going to be throughout the day. As long as we can verify that with visits or GPS, things are going well. But if we notice that he went somewhere that it's not on the GPS, or we noticed that he wasn't at work when he said, those are all grounds for a restructure or a revocation. And depending on the severity level of a violation of his conditions of release, some are a lot more workable than others. and we always deal with those through essentially they're called hearings and release. But to make it more familiar for everyone, it's essentially kind of like a parole board. Is who we'd work with to see if his conditions need to change. We have a very reduced caseload. Again, like I said, if some of you are familiar with probation or parole, some agents have 60 to 200 offenders that they supervise. ISR per statute, per that 244.12 statute, ISR agents are only able to supervise up to 30 agents per 30 offenders per 2 agents, which comes down to 15 offenders an agent. So yes, we supervise 6 counties, but in that 6 counties, the most offenders we can supervise between the 4 of us is 60 people. And that might seem like a lot to everyone, but this is seeing people several times a week, you know, until they start adjusting and going through separate phases. You can hit the next slide, Brad. Again, these are people on my supervision team. Janice Camphy and Jeremiah Sims. They are more of the primary agents for the east side of our territory, but Mr. Patterson is subject to searching and reporting to them on days that I'm off or on vacation, so on and so forth. But Mitchell Swanson and myself, Eric Welly, will be conducting the majority of the visits. My supervisor, Roman George, he supervises a few different teams, but he's very much so a hands-on supervisor. You know, a big thing to get away from it, this number down here is a voicemail number that you would call, and we're actually the St. Cloud East ISR team, and that would be option number 1 on that call. Essentially, it's a voicemail line because we don't give direct cell phone numbers out because we work such sporadic hours and days of the week that I'm often not working. And if I'm not working, I'm not by my phone. Whereas we have an on-call number that an agent is constantly checking throughout the day. And if it's something that's, you know, if you notice Mr. Patterson or anyone for that matter doing something that you believe to be, you know, illegal, bad, or know that it's something he shouldn't be doing, you know, report it to the sheriff's office and they also can sort it out. If it's something that you believe to be, you know, more than a call and a voicemail, if that makes sense. But I'll leave that there until I believe there's nothing on the next slide for me. Is there, Ren?
Nope, you nailed it. Thanks.
All right, I'll leave that there for the Q&A or whatever. So until the Q&A.
Yep. Thanks, Eric. All right, and just like Eric said, is if you see this individual out in the community and you just have a question like, can he be out or should he be out, or maybe the route he's walking perhaps could be different or something, that's certainly something you can call in and get more information on that voicemail line. But if you see him and the hair on the back of your neck stands up and you have concern for someone's safety or welfare, you believe he may be up to some imminent harm, I want you to call 911. Your best and most direct resource for you is your local law enforcement. And the Crow Wing County Sheriff's Office is no stranger to this population. As you heard the captain talk about, they've been monitoring this population of folks for a very long time, and they are good at what they do. If you have just a general question about maybe the policing initiatives and you want to know more information or a little bit more detail from the captain or his team, you can certainly call the Sheriff's Office non-emergency number, and they'd be happy to assist you as you gain more, get more of your questions answered. Other resources I want to share with you today as you're thinking about all the information I've thrown at you, and thank you for bearing with me on that, is the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. This is our statewide agency for victim services. If you're wondering about how to have or engage in those age-appropriate conversations, if you're looking for resources, you're a caregiver or an employer who employs a lot of teenagers or something like that lines, there's a great deal of resources available on their website to assist you as you're looking to implement some of this stuff into your existing planning efforts. And then I want to speak to you about your local victim services provider. Now, information like this, no matter how hard we try in these types of difficult conversations, will undoubtedly impact somebody viewing this right now. Statistics being what they are, knowing what we know, the odds that someone viewing this has either been directly impacted by this kind of harm or has supported someone who has survived this kind of harm. Conversations like this can tear open those old wounds and lay them out to bear. And in times like these where our stress is already running high, it can be overwhelming. I want to make sure you know who your local victim services folks are. And we're fortunate enough, hopefully, to have them on our call with us today. They will be available to answer questions if they do come up at the Q&A, but also you have their contact number here. If you're not comfortable doing it in a public forum or a format like this, we certainly understand, but please do reach out if you yourself need help, or make sure you get this important information in the hands of those who may benefit most from it. So as I wrap up my presentation for you tonight, I want to just kind of put a bow on things. If you take nothing else away from all the stuff I've thrown at you, please let it be this: the 3 90s and the 2 R's. What we know from our data and our research, and folks, we know a lot, is that 90% of those who go through the full state risk management system who have engaged in this kind of harm do not go on to reoffend. 90% of those engaging in this type of harm are known to the people they hurt. They use that relationship and that trust to exploit that access. And so as you're thinking about the totality of this and the breadth of this, know and remember that 90% of those actively engaging in this kind of harm then are not known to the system as sex offenders. They have not yet been caught. And that is why that awareness is so very critical around all communities. It really comes down to that relationship component. That social proximity that people get and attain and maintain with those whom they might harm is so much more telling than any geographical proximity could be. Knowing where someone's head hits the pillow at night is comforting to a degree, but it's where they spend their waking hours. And that is where I want everyone's awareness at its highest, because we know that they can go through and be in virtually any community. They travel for work and recreation and all other manner of reasons. So again, broad awareness is just so critical. As a last little snapshot for some additional resources, just know that this is the tip of the iceberg for what's out there. Please, if anything, just know that this should not be the only information you receive on this important topic tonight. That go out and check out some of these other resources, read through their information and see what works best for your family and your community. If you're wondering if a piece of information you found is valid or valuable, certainly reach out to one of these agencies that I've already shared with you today to ensure that whatever information you've come across is credible and can be applied effectively. Lastly, as far as state resources go, I want to draw your attention to 2. There's the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension's criminal history search function. Anyone can go on to that search, and all you need is the person's first name, last name, and date of birth, and you can get their criminal history, their convictions, or their adult convictions at least. I recommend using this tool, and perhaps in conjunction with other tools, if you're vetting people that may be coming into the lives of those you care for. If you're considering a coach or a babysitter or a tutor or whatever the case may be, this is a tool for you to utilize. And then lastly, the Department of Corrections website itself. We have a number of good training, self-guided trainings for care providers on this topic with this individual, some tip sheets that are available, and most importantly, all the data and research I've been referencing through this presentation is there in its pure form, not just in PowerPoint slide form. You can review and read it yourself today. You can draw your own conclusions of it. I encourage you to do so if you're interested. If you cannot find it, certainly do call me, let me know. I will make sure you get there. Also, the DOC maintains the offender locator, and that is for anybody under supervision of the Department of Corrections, regardless of their offense. If they're working with an agent in the community or even in prison, and if you've heard of a case or you want to know what's going on with somebody, that would be your search tool. And then lastly, that public registrant search, where that 470 some individuals I mentioned today, if you go online right now, if you're on your phone or if you're sitting next to a computer, you can go to it, you can pull it up, and there you'll see that those individuals that are out in the community today. So with that, I am going to throw the microphone back over to the captain to guide us through the next phase of Q&A.
Can you hear me, Brad?
Yep, just got you now, Cap.
We are having camera difficulties. Well, as long as you can hear me, we'll go with that, I guess.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, so we're gonna go through some chat questions that did come up. We only have two.
Okay.
The first question was, will the session recording be available somewhere after the session? The answer is yes. Once we work through the technicalities of that, converting it from this Teams format into some type of a YouTube or Facebook type setting. Nonetheless, watch our Facebook if you're interested in revisiting any of the slides that Brad went over today for more information. Second question says, so he doesn't have anyone physically with him when he's going to work, to the grocery store, etc. Question mark. He just has to tell you where he is going. No, he would have to be chaperoned by two of the workers at through the community-based services organization. So if he's going to go grocery shopping, or he wants to go to Target or something to pick up some supplies, he would have two individuals with him to monitor his activities. And like Eric had said, also the GPS will be part of that, at least in the early time frame of his release into our community. That is all the questions in the chat format. So if you do have other questions, either raise your hand or feel free to type the questions. New one just popped up. Will he be able to go for walks independently? Same answer as previous. Where he is, he will have two people with him, and again, a GPS monitor with him. That is all I have for typed questions. I think two people with him for how long? 24 hours a day forever?
At least the first year.
At least for the first year, I'm told by staff on site here. What is the significance of the two people? That is just, I assume, the community-based services policies in conjunction with the Department of Corrections would be. Brad, do you have a better answer than that?
Yeah, I would think that just exactly that. It supports his transition. It's just a means to ensure he's applying his skills and tools effectively under the watchful guidance of those trained staff. Should he struggle with behaviors or conduct, they can intervene directly, and he wouldn't necessarily be able to progress further in his programming. Or on the flip side, should he perform well, should he have internalized those those treatment tools and show it effectively with the oversight of that trained staff personnel, then in time, he may find that he does earn the ability to begin doing more things independently. So I think, you know, having the long view for our attendees is important. So it's a crawl, walk, run scenario. But remembering that these services are not indefinite, that the goal, at least from the corrections perspective, is to begin to transition out of his life ultimately, because we know our time with him is finite. And then as far as his work with the other service providers, no doubt they have, I wouldn't doubt, some similar hopes and expectations for him. So definitely, I wouldn't want anyone to take away from that, okay, he's with 2 staff, so I don't need to talk to my kids about how to perhaps safely engage with a stranger they may encounter while walking on the street. This could be a great opportunity in an age appropriate way, so as not to incite or create fear in our children, but to talk with them about if they find themselves in a scenario where something doesn't feel right, or, you know, somebody's approaching them on the sidewalk in a menacing way or something to that effect. It could be an opportunity to do those what if scenarios and so on, to assist them in internalizing kind of those larger life goals, hopefully, of our children remaining safe for a lifetime as well. So with him particularly, we know he's going to have some external controls, meaning direct staff support, at least for a period of time, and obviously agent and law enforcement support in the community around him. But then ultimately, yeah, I mean, there will probably be a day where we will see him attaining more autonomy and a greater ability. But if you were to see him out in the community on his own, let's say, and think, well, geez, I remember from the meeting, he's supposed to have staff with him, make a phone call. Make a phone call. If you see him going somewhere and you think it's concerning that he's by himself and unaccompanied, and you feel that, like I say, that hair is raising up on the back of your neck, call 911. Right now, law enforcement has a great working relationship with this home and the operators, and they will know what's going on with this transition, as will corrections. So definitely be part of that eyes and ears component, because like you've no doubt thought, Brad, you know, the cops can't be there 24/7, the agent can't be there 24/7, staff are there 24/7, but all of us together are going to be working to not only keep an eye on him, but just everyone in the community more broadly.
All right, next question. How long has this facility he'll be living in been established? There are many families on this road who weren't aware of it. The facility itself, I don't have an exact answer for that, but the MSOCs and the community-based services has been around for over 20 years, doing this kind of supervision and such, probably statewide. And Brad, maybe you can thumbs up that, or what, if I'm shooting that accurately.
Yes. Yep.
They're a
Yep.
well-established organization, and obviously probation, ISR is, is its own entity. Why did he relocate to Brainerd? Don't have an answer for that. Like Brad said, these offenders have the right, as long as it's approved, to relocate to any community that they wish.
Yep, and to piggyback on that too, Captain, it's a resource thing too. We want to make sure that as we're contemplating potential locations that may best serve their needs as they continue that reintegration, we want to find the things that are going to provide them with the best available resources. And so no doubt that weighed in on the ultimate determination of where we are. And so that's often a question though, is why did they choose here? And just like you said, Captain, we know that they move. They move for very many of the same reasons we move, and it's for closeness to resources, family support, financial support, work, perhaps, all of these things, treatment availability, and so on. So there's a lot of dynamics involved, definitely.
Next question, will we be notified when he is no longer on GPS monitoring? And maybe I refer that to Eric Welly to better answer that question.
No, that isn't something that is public. The fact that he's on GPS is one of his conditions is public, but when it is taken off or extended is not.
And to add on to that too, yeah, it's GPS. Think of it as a tool in Eric's toolbox. If he's meeting those expectations, similar to what we described with staff and so on, it can be something that he earns the ability to come off of, but it can instantly be reapplied should the need arise. And so for the duration of his supervision, he could potentially go on and come off GPS at various times, dependent on the need of the supervision team to ensure his compliance in the community.
He does not have employment.
All right, next question is, does he have employment here? And the answer is no, he does not. Did he get to choose where he'll be living, or did the DOC place him in a facility? I think we kind of hit on that, how that one came out. Will he be here for a determined amount of time? Again, we don't know. He could be here for, a few months. He could be here for a few years or even longer. It's as long as he's meeting his expectations of ISR and his registry, then he should be good to go there. Any other questions on here? I think that is it for the type questions. So I think, do we get to know if he leaves then? Good question. So law enforcement, when they move in, I'll just answer for mine, and then Brad will just have you polish up that answer. But
sure.
When he moves in, obviously we're having this notification meeting. We're letting the community know that he is here. He has to register any changes, address and vehicles and employment, scars, marks, tattoo, all this kind of stuff. Regarding when he leaves the community, we don't have a formal, meeting like this to say he's no longer residing here. But Brad, can you from your
Yep, absolutely. So it was actually just recently modified in the Notification Act, where law enforcement will provide notification if a registrant leaves a community, if law enforcement determines that the likelihood of them returning is very low. Now, obviously, with resources and as they establish themselves, the odds of that determination being made are obviously probably difficult, to say the least. But should law enforcement determine in this case, like if he were to leave, to transition to another place or whatever the case may be, move to another state, and law enforcement says, yep, we think the odds of him returning to the community are low enough, they can provide notification. And just like the captain said, it wouldn't be in this formal of a format, but it would be probably web-based or very similar to that notification of just that he has departed the area. But I always like to add that should that notification be made, I don't ever want anyone to be left feeling as though it's law enforcement or corrections sounding an all clear and saying, okay, everybody, we can all go back to the way we were. Hopefully this will add to what you're already doing in your day-to-day lives and be something you continue whether or not this man or anyone in the future may reside in or near your communities. So we definitely want to keep that awareness up and always present.
Another question, being a woman, how can I protect myself? I'm scared. I think Brad did a very good job in, kind of breaking down the amount of offenders, that we deal with, that we monitor and everything else. Now, that obviously doesn't give 100% security, if you will, to some people, and that's understandable. As what I would answer in that is, there's various safety courses that people can take. There's various outlets or devices and things like that if you chose to go down that path, whether it be pepper spray, those kinds of things, I would suggest you get some proper training on those. But the best thing, and Brad hit on it earlier, is 911 is always the go-to for anybody, no matter if you're feeling in danger or you witness something. If you see something out of place or you just don't feel right, call law enforcement. That's why we're here. We do all kinds of things for public safety, whether that be meeting, somebody's working late at home and they need an escort or something like that to their vehicle. I mean, that's why we are here as law enforcement. So that doesn't guarantee 100%. I understand that, but we think that the checks and balances are in pretty good place with what we do. So.
Definitely. And then I'll just add too, I don't know if Heidi, if you're on, if you would unmute. Heidi's with the Sexual Assault Services and may have some additional ideas and thoughts to share. Hopefully was able to log in. I'm not entirely sure. No,
She was on there.
she
We're
was. Okay.
Hold on, we're gonna see if we can get her.
Okay, if we can get her on, I think that'd be fantastic. But just for this person's question too, while we're waiting to see if we can get Heidi, is certainly do reach out to them as well. Safety planning, it's just like the captain said, is you've got a lot of different options, alternatives to build as robust a safety plan so that your life can go forward safely, comfortably. But what we don't want is for you to stop engaging in your community activities, stop going on your walks, stop going out and doing the things you enjoy within your community. That would be a true loss. And so,
Brad.
hey,
Sorry.
hey, perfect, Heidi. I'll let you take it from there. I'm sure you've been following along.
Yes, I was waving on the waiver thing because I couldn't unmute, but they have me on. So first I want to say that Brad and Eric and law enforcement have done a wonderful job. Reality is every 73 seconds in America, somebody is sexually assaulted. And out of that, every 9 minutes, that victim is a child. So that is only, we get our numbers from what is reported, but reality again is that 20% or less than 20% of sexual assaults are reported. And out of those reported, with children, 93% know who their perpetrator is. And with adults, 8 out of 10 know who their perpetrator is, so it's some acquaintance. So stranger sexual assault is very rare. And I know, we do these community meetings and people are really worried about this perpetrator, this level 3. And I don't want to say it's a blessing, but we do talk about that because we have a face and he's a known sex offender. Most sex offenders, we don't know who they are. So the one who asked, I'm a woman and I'm afraid, and how do I protect myself? Being educated on what statistics are and having safety plans and even talking and working with your children is very, very important. The best thing you can do is know statistically what happens in sexual assaults and who the perpetrators are. And it starts young and it needs to be age appropriate with what we teach our children, our grandchildren, and even in our schools. So the best things that we can do to be safe is to be educated and know, we don't know who level 2 agencies like ours knows level 2 that are around, but we don't know all the perpetrators. And just like Brad was talking about the funnel, out of 1,000 perpetrators, 5 of those will end up in prison, of those who are arrested or reported. So out of 1,000 perpetrators, 5 end up in prison. And that's just at maybe 20% of people reporting. So the best that we can do to change this is make it okay for victims to come forward and talk openly with our children and make sure that they get education through school and through parenting. And it's like Brad said, sorry, I want to get all this in, is small pieces at a time. We don't scare them, but we inform them. Did I hit everything?
I think so. Hopefully, we'll see if some follow-ups. Very poignant information. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing that very critical perspective, because you are the subject matter expert in the field of victim services. So I appreciate it very, very much. Thank you.
Yes, even here in Crow Wing County, I just did our reports for the last quarter. So we averaged 300 to 400. Sorry, my dogs are going to go crazy behind me now after 2 hours of here. So we averaged 300 to 400 new victim clients that we work with in a year here in Crow Wing County. So that's a big number for this area. But if you think about people who don't report or reach out for help, that's a lot that don't. So, we come across a lot, and still the majority here in Crow Wing County are also acquaintance. sexual assaults or somebody they know.
All right, thank you for that, Heidi. We're gonna keep on with the questions here. So the next one is, what about children and teenage girls that get dropped off on the bus whose parents work? Again, I'll just kind of defer to some of my and Brad's previous answers. Maybe that'd be a situation where, you know, talk with your school bus driver, talk with your school. Cell phones are a good safety device for, you know, kids, even the younger kids now. Some people don't believe in that, but, you know, it is a good go-to safety mechanism. But talk to your law enforcement if you have those concerns, and they're good concerns. Talk to your kids about, you know, safety measures when they're walking down the street. You know, that whole stranger approaching, that kind of stuff. You know, I mean, we could teach a whole class on that side of you know, kid safety and things like that. Just vigilance, and that is your best step.
Absolutely, and that is just like Heidi said, is kind of the weird, you know, the sweet to the bitter of meetings like this is that it gets people thinking of just those types of things and starting to formulate those plans, having those critical conversations with the like the Kevin said, the bus company, with the school, with all of those people that work so hard in and around our children to provide that safe, secure environment for them. So, great question, and I encourage you to reach out to those different entities to collaborate with them, and know that agencies such as mine, I'll come out and speak to any group that gives me a microphone. And so if you're like, let's bring Brad out here and talk to this group, or let's get Heidi and her team online to come out and talk with our kids, this is what matters so much. And so please do reach out for those additional services to help, definitely.
Next question, can you send it in to the tip text if you are not comfortable reporting something? And I'm just going to assume that she's referring to something on the lines of like our tip 411 program, which is advertised heavily through our Facebook and also our website. It's an anonymous, easy for me to say, system where people can interact, not just about this, but also any crime. And we encourage people to use that appropriately, obviously, but use it because that gives us more eyes and ears in the community, and we can actually interact with that anonymous tipster, and it's just a really great, robust program. And two, we also have I'll just put a plug in there, that the text to 911, that is a thing, and you know, statewide, and that's for anybody who's in danger, things like that. You can use that, but if you're in a situation where you need to report something to law enforcement and you want to do it surreptitiously, that would be a good avenue potentially for you to utilize. Next question. Brad, did you have anything else on that one?
No, sir. I think you nailed it.
Does the offender know, in all caps, the people he'll be living with, or are they employed by the DOC? So, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. He does not know the people. DOC is not running this program. It's agency from the Department of Human Services, Direct Care and Treatment, community-based services. We want to be good neighbors. We've been, like Andy said, in the area for over 20 years, almost 25 years. Community-based services. We've worked very well with law enforcement. As Andy has said, he will always have 2 staff with him, probably at least for the first year, if he should choose to live with us that long. So there will always be 2 staff with. That's nighttime. It's 2 awake staff. The home itself has alarms on all the doors and windows, which is an added protection if he should take off. Will he be out for walks in the area if that's something he likes to do? But he'll always have 2 staff with him, at least the first year. So we want to be good neighbors. Unfortunately, there's HIPAA laws that don't allow us to give you all the information that might make you feel better. But we assure you, we've been doing this a long time, and we want to be good neighbors and keep everyone safe. And should he take off, staff will follow him. They'll have their cell phones with, they'll call 911, we'll do whatever we have to do to make sure he's safe, the community's safe, the neighbors are safe, so.
And just to piggyback on that, I want to stress for people that are listening just how critical these relationships between our community partners and agencies that are serving this very difficult population as effectively as they are in the community. Because again, remember, their time with the Department of Corrections will expire. He will come off paper. And if we can't work with their experts while transitioning him safely into the community in a way that is safe but effective, then we ultimately set ourselves up for failure and him up for failure. Because on that date when he is no longer required by the courts to be on this kind of supervision or this level of care, then he is left to his devices. And so it's just, I cannot stress enough just how important having these intermediary community-based resources are. And I just want to thank you and your staff and your team for all your work as we collaborate going forward, because we see just how valuable it is. Recidivism rates, when it comes to this population, often people will ask in the Q&A, you know, Brad, you got all this data, what is the recidivism rate? And you may find it interesting or kind of an aha to know that when this study began way back in the 90s, recidivism rates at their highest were at just under 17%, like 16 point something percent. That's already significantly lower than what most people perceive this population to reoffend at. Most would be impossible to get somebody to agree that Brad said they reoffend at a rate lower than 50%, and they'd think that that was inaccurate. 17%. And so that's at its highest. Now it's down while under supervision to about 3%, and overall about 5%. And so again, cold comfort. Nothing we're going to say tonight is going to make you feel comfortable, but remember, that's not the goal. The goal is awareness, relaxed, alert awareness, calm application, where you can start to really work in all these different components and agencies into your family and community safety plans to ensure a lifetime of safe living. So thank you so much for being here tonight and for assisting us in answering that question.
That is all I see in the chat questions for right now. We'll unmute our telephone callers, and if there are any of our telephone callers who have any questions or comments, you can unmute yourself now and ask that of the group. So we'll give us a minute or two to see if we have any call-in folks. Any call-in folks with any questions or comments for the group? Go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask that now. And from Jennifer at the Dispatch, just to let everybody know, the Dispatch newspaper will be writing a story about this meeting to help inform the public as well. So you can check out that print or on their website if you'd like to see more about that. I'm going to give one last call for any call-in or phone listeners who have any questions or comments for us regarding this. Otherwise, we're going to wrap up this meeting, I think. Hearing none, from the Sheriff's Office perspective, again, just to reiterate, we do monitor intensively all of our offenders who are in the registry, whether they are a level 1, 2, 3, or there's a not assigned level as well. We check on them a minimum of 4 times a year. Other times, much more than that. So there is one question that just popped up. Is this a new house or operation on Johnson? This is a newer facility, a new house on Johnson. And Heidi just added, thank you. Remember, Sexual Assault Services is always here to answer questions. And their phone number is 218-828-0494, or you can probably Google them as well and find out all those different resources that Brad spoke about earlier. So with that, I will close our portion of it and give Brad any last comments. And thank you all for taking the time to educate yourself. Feel free to always contact us with questions, comments, concerns about anything going on in your community. It doesn't even have to be related to this topic, but that's why we are here. If you see something, please say something so we can look into it. And Brad, I'll turn it over to you for closing.
Very good. Thank you, Captain. And just, I want to mirror that. I want to thank everybody who attended tonight, took time out of their evening to get this important information. And do reach out with your questions. If anything came up, and I know on the recorded format, it can be difficult sometimes to want to ask your question, and I get that. So just don't go to bed tonight with a question that you didn't get answered burning in your mind. Please do reach out. Thank you, Captain, and thank you, Heidi, and your team for having us out here to talk with you and share this information. Have a good night.
Thank you, Brad.